What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the third college football episode of Take His Whistle podcast. I am one of your hosts, Josh, and in this episode, of course, as always, we got a lot for you guys. Not many upsets this week, but definitely a specific game that we want to talk about that happened in Week 7, and then obviously we've got some good Week 8 matchups coming for you guys. So just stay tuned for that.
Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
Lets it fly.
Oh my goodness! Touchdown LSU! They win the game! Back today, so I got time to be tripping and writing no love song. Yeah, writing no love song. We all experience love loss. Yeah.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Take His Whistle podcast. I am one of your hosts, Josh, and as always, I'm here with my good friend Parker.
What's up, everybody?
And to start off the episode, I guess we'll go ahead and jump into it here, Parker. Obviously, first off, Week 7. I think the best first topic to start off with is the Washington and Oregon game. And what happened in that game. Actually, no. You know what? Let's start off. I almost forgot. Let's start off with our totals from our last week predictions, because I believe you have those already, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I do have those. And if anybody was keeping track, you do know last week was two different stories here between the two of us. I had a pretty good week. Chad did not. Chad was looking for that bounce back week, and he did fall fairly short of that week.
I can't get it, dude. I can't get it.
Josh went 10-8 on the week. Myself, I went 12-6 for the season, which obviously it's only been 2 weeks for us technically. I am looking at my record of 23 correct, 10 wrong, which is really good. If you are making a parlay, I'm your guy. Apparently, I don't know. I'm pulling this out my ass. Josh, you are looking at 19-14. 2 weeks in, so we got some improvement to see there.
Listen. All right, listen. The playoffs, they're right there. We can reach it. We're looking at a wild card spot right now, but there's still potential to win the conference, or sorry, the division. You know what I mean? So, we're gonna try our best to rebound this week. And listen, guys. Just keep following me. I know the first couple of weeks was rough. I know, but I promise. Give me one more chance, and I promise I know ball. I promise. I'll lead you guys to the promised land. Just keep rocking with me. Maybe, hopefully, and we got it. We got it this week. I promise.
I'll tell you what. This week does not really fare for you too well. I got to feel this is like the most toss-ups basically throughout all the top 25 we've had all year. Every game I could see the I guess so-called underdog could win a game this week. Almost every matchup.
Well, hopefully, Parker, I can maybe not get so many wrong this time. Maybe I got to bet on some underdogs more often this week, because these ranked teams, I'll tell you what, they're letting me down. So, might have to take some of the underdogs more often. But off of that note,
we'll get into those predictions later on in the episode. So,
of course,
stay tuned to that.
Yes, of course. So, jumping back, actually, I guess I should say, into Week 7, Washington, Oregon. Parker, what'd you notice from that game? And how do you feel about the two teams so far, or going forward?
Well, the game definitely lived up to all its potential. All the hype that was built up for that game, we saw. Washington pulled out the win against Oregon, 36-33. And last week I even said, I think this game, the winner of this game is determined at who is at home, and obviously Washington was at home. And I think that if then it's a completely different ballgame. Maybe it's a 3-point win for Oregon. Maybe it's a blowout by Oregon. Who knows? The main thing that which I mean, it's not a shock to anybody, but obviously the main thing is the quarterback play for the Huskies. Once again, we have seen Michael Penix. Is that how you? Is that? Am I saying that right?
You are, yeah.
Michael Penix again, putting on a show. As of right now, what is this, week 7? Week 7, if you had to ask me, he's starting to run away with the MVP, or not, the Heisman, I'm sorry. He's running away with the Heisman Trophy, and what he just kinda torched up Oregon's defense. He went for 302 yards, 4 touchdowns. He did throw an interception in there, but, I mean, whenever you're putting up numbers like that, 300 plus yards, 4 touchdowns against the so-called 8th team in the nation, you're allowed to throw a pick. You throw a pick, that's a bye. Um, so I mean, I think it just kind of just continues to implement himself as that best running or quarterback in the league this year.
Yeah, I mean, uh, on top of the QBs too, like everyone on both sides of or both teams just performed very well. Rushing on both teams was very successful, very good. The receiving on both teams was very good, very successful. It was just an overall shootout, an overall great game to watch, and a very emotional one for Michael Penix. Gave a very emotional post game speech after the game, and it was definitely good. It was definitely fun to watch, and I'll say this, I'm not sure if you know this, Parker, but Indiana fans are definitely looking at Michael Penix Jr. and punching a pillow or two tonight, or they probably have been for the last
All
almost
year.
2 years now.
Did
What's
he
that?
commit there and then decommit?
He was there for his freshman year and then
And then
transferred to
transferred.
Washington.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
know that. I really didn't know that. Wow. Yeah, definitely. That is some air punching if I've ever seen some.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. But I totally agree with you, though. Michael Penix Jr., just, I mean, he has looked outstanding this season so far. And what he's doing with that Washington team is definitely something to watch every single week. And, I mean, he definitely looks like he's running away with it. I mean, we'll see how Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, we'll see how those two guys who are definitely up there in the Heisman race. We'll see how they fare for the rest of the season, but obviously there is a big Caleb Williams performance in Week 7 that we will be talking about a little later in the episode that might have dropped him down the rankings a little bit. So,
Yeah,
like I said, we'll get to that, but I
and then
mean, just
for
outs.
Washington, they go ahead.
I was just gonna say, just an outstanding team performance by Washington to pull that win out.
And with that win, beating a team like Oregon who was ranked so high, that did jump them not just one but 2 spots. They jumped over Penn State and Oklahoma in the same week, putting them at number 5 in the rankings, right there in that upper echelon of legit playoff contenders. And I think we both touched on it last week. If Washington could seriously be in the conversation, uh, and
Which, yet
now
again,
with
if we're going back to that point real quick, yet again we're looking at a moment where Josh was wrong.
yeah, I mean, to anybody, that's such a 50-50 ball game. Now, like, if you're not a fan of either one of those teams, you're kind of just picking a team and just rolling with it. Um, I just I have not watched too much of Washington going into the game against Oregon, but what I did watch of them, I just find their offense is just so good, so electric that I mean, I think that it was a game of who can score more points, and from what I've seen from Washington's offense, it's Washington. Um, but now
Yeah.
we're looking at a serious threat to take over this year and put themselves in the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that program is a program that, historically wise, you don't really look at that closely and go, "Oh, hey, they're at the top again." Like this is a kind of a rare top season for them, and I mean, boy, have they made themselves something to look at this year. Because I mean, just again, they're just so good, and
And
going into last week, I personally had some questions about their defense, and obviously they did good enough to allow the team to win by 3. So I mean, all props to them. I'll definitely give them their
now,
flowers. And the rest of their season, I mean, the rest of their schedule, if you look at it, Parker, I mean, they definitely have a winnable. They definitely can win out. And I mean, if they do that, I mean, that's easy playoffs for them, in my opinion.
but I mean, at the same time, especially with this season has gone with the upsets that we have seen, their season doesn't get any easier at all. They play a lot of good teams. Even a team like Stanford, who we both talked about last week, as being awful, being terrible, and they pulled out a huge win um,
Yep.
against Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, they got to keep their foot on the gas pedal. They cannot let up. They can't think that they are just right out gonna beat their opponents every week. They have to go in with that killer mentality like they had against Oregon. Or we could easily see this whole rant that we're having about Washington be absolutely meaningless, because what we've seen so far in college football is, hey, even if you are a more talented team, a more well coached team, any given Saturday you can go out and lose.
Yeah, I mean, and especially that last 4 game stretch for Washington, if you look at it, it's definitely not an easy one. But, like I said, definitely a schedule where I can definitely see them winning out and going undefeated this season. But moving on from Washington, even though they are very good and we could talk about them forever, um, let's go on and move on to another Washington team that looked like they were on the rise all season. And then 2 weeks ago, it kind of looks like this team has just started to crash and burn. And the team I am talking about here, Parker, is Washington State.
Yeah. I this is another team I can kind of go on about. But the first thing, before we even talk about Washington State, I want to talk about Arizona. So Arizona, if you guys remember last week, they went toe to toe with USC in a shootout game that ended in an overtime win for USC. And we both even said it. Even you can even go back to the previous week when they did play Washington and they barely lost that game. But we both even said it, that Arizona is hungry. They are not a team to be messed with, and they are gonna pull off an upset sometime this week, or sometime this year, I'm sorry. Now, with that being said, I didn't think that it was gonna be a 44-6. Let me say that one more time. A 44-6 on the road. On the road, which is just crazy. 44-6 against Washington State. Arizona did whatever they wanted to. Running the ball, passing the ball, defensively. I think props needs to be given to Arizona more than it needs to be hounded against Washington State.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's hard for me because when I look at Washington State, I look at a team that beat Oregon State just 3 weeks ago. And then, quite literally, after that game, they have just looked like a team that doesn't know what's going on. They lose to UCLA in a very good defensive performance by UCLA, and then, obviously what happened last week happened, and I just I don't know. Like they looked so good 3 weeks ago, and now it's so easy to just point and laugh at them.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this game. Cameron Ward, who I know I was pretty high on, especially just over with the win against Oregon State, I was fairly high on him. He didn't have a bad game against Arizona. He threw 22 of 30, which is a really good percentage if you ask me. He almost threw for 200 passing yards, and he didn't throw a touchdown, and he had a pick. But I mean, overall, he had a fair game. It was just like all game they couldn't get. Obviously, the running, they had absolutely nothing running the ball. It looks like their highest rusher was 23 yards on 3 attempts for Dylan Payne. Uh, Other than that, they had absolutely nothing as far as running the ball. So I mean, I don't know if this is a complete collapse from Washington State or just a lockdown defense that nobody knew Arizona had. I really don't know what the answer is for Washington State now and going forward.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we've said this for a couple teams already, but I mean, especially being in the Pac-12, their schedule does not get any easier. They're coming off of 2 losses in a row, and they're going to Eugene to play Oregon. So, I mean, surely that's a third loss in a row, unless they can figure out what's going on. And then after that, they have to go to a fairly, a fairly decent team. I'd like to say, in Arizona State. I mean, they don't have the best record, but they've definitely been giving some teams some problems as of the last couple weeks. And I mean, just yeah, like I said, I just don't know how to feel about them because they've seemingly crashed and burned, and I don't know what's gonna happen with them. I hope that they can get under their feet again, or whatever the saying is. I think I said it right. But yeah, it's definitely rough to see for sure.
If I had to guess, I mean, out of just all the games this season, this has to be the most embarrassing loss of the year, 100%.
I would personally argue that Colorado loss last week was maybe more embarrassing. Personally,
Yeah, the only thing that I get what you're saying. That was extremely embarrassing for them because how just bad Stanford is this year. But Washington State, what makes it so much worse is this game was at home. This was a home game for you
yeah,
all. I couldn't
yeah.
imagine. I bet the same with you. If Louisville, and which we'll get into Louisville and Kentucky later on in the episode, they both had pretty bad weeks. But if they were to go be at home, play, let's say Kentucky was playing Vanderbilt, who is been the worst team in the SEC for some time, and they lost 44-6 at Kroger Field, dude, I might be burning all my Kentucky gear at that point because that you're not that stuff doesn't happen. You don't let that happen off of just pride alone. You can't let you lose at home every once in a while. It happens. It sucks, but it happens. But when you get absolutely dominated, where you get shut out for 3 straight quarters, I mean, it doesn't get any worse than that.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Moving on from some of these lowlights to start off the episode, I kind of want to point out something that I just kind of you know it was one of the few things I was right about last week, but um, just knew it was going to happen. I mean, if you look at both teams, you could see it from a mile away. Notre Dame 48, USC 20. I saw that win for Notre Dame coming again from a mile away. I said it last week. I'll say it here again. That USC defense cannot stop anybody. I mean, I'm pretty sure me and Parker could line up on offense and score a touchdown
Whoa,
against that
whoa,
USC
whoa, whoa,
defense.
whoa, whoa,
I
whoa,
no,
whoa, whoa, whoa.
they are just
That is
not
Josh's
good.
take. That is Josh's take. That is not my take. I am
And I'm gonna
not
stand on it,
saying
and
that.
I'm
And
gonna stand on that hill, and I'm gonna die on that hill.
I, you die on that hill alone. I'll tell you that much. I'm not putting a say in that one.
That's kind of crazy that you would just leave me on the hill. You just
Nope,
leave me
nope,
there.
nope, nope, nope,
That kind
nope.
of
Because
hurts.
you know what? I hope someone from USC hears this and they're like, come out to a practice. We'll fly you out here to Southern California, and I want you to have a practice, and I want you to score on these boys.
Listen. If that were to happen and I were to go to a USC practice, I would probably get my head ripped off. But hey, I'm in fucking California. At least I can enjoy myself after getting my head ripped off. So I'll take that any day of the week.
At least they got Bronny James to cheer for here in a couple months.
That is true. That is true. Glad to see him healthy, by the way. Glad to see him healthy and back on the court, for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna be looking
But,
forward to that.
oh yeah. But, anyways, going back to USC football, again, 48-20, lost to Notre Dame. It was at Notre Dame. But, I mean, just when you look at the two teams, you see a more balanced Notre Dame team. And so, for some people, I can see how they would have said it would have been closer for sure. But I just always felt that Notre Dame was going to take that win, especially coming off of that loss to Louisville, and essentially having, all their hopes and dreams of the playoffs or a national championship for that matter, pretty much just getting absolutely ruined. I mean, they were definitely looking for vengeance, and they definitely got it, I think, in my opinion. We saw some, I don't know if you saw the video, Parker, but we saw some taunting after the game from a Notre Dame fan to Caleb Williams.
Yes,
and that's kind of that's kind of sparked a little rivalry between Caleb Williams and Notre Dame fans. But I mean, a very good performance by Notre Dame, and a very good bounce back game for Sam Hartman and Audric Estime and just Notre Dame as a whole. And like I mentioned earlier, a very, very poor performance by Caleb Williams. Just probably his worst collegiate game of his career.
Yeah, I mean, this is like to your point. This sparked a little rivalry between Caleb Williams and Notre Dame. I mean, this is a game where you're going on the road against a very good opponent in Notre Dame, regardless what their records say, regardless that they have two losses. They're coming off a loss to Notre Dame or to Louisville. This is a game that NFL scouts are going to be watching if you're Caleb Williams. You got to know that. You are looked at as clearly the best quarterback in the draft this year. Maybe in college football, some people might even say that. But you go on the road against a tough opponent and you throw 3 interceptions. I mean, what does it take to make a quarterback realize that, or I guess let me rephrase this. There's got to be something. I don't know what the word is, but not every quarterback has that, almost that mentality where I'm gonna win this game regardless if my team is behind me or not. I'm gonna win this game by myself. And it kind of seems that Caleb Williams doesn't have that. You know, um, this is a game where their defense sucks, so Notre Dame's going to put up a lot of points. Caleb Williams needs to be the guy to be like, "Hey, our offense is getting shit on. I'm going to lead our offense to match Notre Dame. If we're not going to stop them, we're going to have to outscore them." And he fell short majorly. 3 interceptions, not what you need from Caleb Williams at all, not from a quarterback at all. Um, so, I mean, this is a big game for NFL scouts in his career to kind of see, like, hey, is this guy really the guy that, let's just say 5 years down the line, we're in the playoffs. Is he going to be able to win us a game in the fourth quarter? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, as far as NFL scouts go, I think a lot of scouts definitely kind of cringed at that performance for sure, especially when you look at their season thus far and you realize that Notre Dame is probably their hardest opponent that they've played by far, and that's how he performed. It definitely makes you scratch your head a little bit and maybe question his gameplay. But I mean, by the way, by no means am I calling Caleb Williams like not good. He's definitely very good. Probably
Oh yeah,
still
yeah,
the best player
definitely.
in college football, if not, one of the best. Um, but it's definitely just I guess a good way to put it is it's definitely like a reality check. It shows that he's still human. He can still make plenty of mistakes, but I'm sure he will turn that around. And I mean, the USC offense is still very good. I know that they kind of stalled in that game, but still a very good offense with Caleb Williams at the helm, and they will definitely look to turn it around this week, and I think they will.
Yeah,
But
and then really quick to go to Notre Dame side, I kind of want to focus on their quarterback, Sam Hartman. Um, Now, obviously, it was a much better game than what he did against Louisville, but still, Sam Hartman struggled a little bit. He only threw for 126 yards. He did have two touchdowns. He didn't throw a pick, but still, so Hartman showed signs in that game where he was not, I guess, quote unquote, dominant. He wasn't a top quarterback like people think that he can be. What do you see
yeah,
from
and
Sam
and
Hartman the past 2 weeks?
well, I mean the past 2 weeks, if you look at that Louisville game, you definitely don't see anything impressive from that game from Hartman. And then, like you said, in the game against USC, you also don't see anything, too crazy impressive. But to bounce back from a game like Louisville and to win against a top 10 team after taking such an embarrassing loss, the loss that seemingly put your team out of playoff contention, and more than likely at least. So and to be able to bounce back from a performance like he had against Louisville is definitely something to point out. But I mean 126 yards, and his to give him props, the two touchdowns like you mentioned. But one thing I'm noticing is still the lack of tight end production from that team. It's something that I see a lot of people saying about that team. Obviously, the rushing attack is great. Audric Estime is a great running back. Regardless of what Louisville fans might think, Audric Estime is a great running back. He's able to produce in any game he plays in. But as far as passing the ball, I mean, I don't think they're getting the tight ends involved as so much, and it's something that you see, at least historically, it's something that you see Notre Dame doing a lot, is getting those tight ends involved. And, I mean, we're seeing the tight end get 2 receptions every game, like, at most, it feels like. And I feel like Sam Hartman could do a little better if he was getting some passes to the tight end, who, I mean, at least in the Louisville game, was seemingly wide open every single play in the middle of the field. Hartman just didn't seem to see him at all. So I mean, I like Hartman. I do. He's a decent quarterback for sure, and he definitely has potential. But as far as what people were saying about him being the guy, especially at the beginning of this season, I think he's very far from it.
Yes, me too. Especially as a senior. Now, I'm guessing I would say that Hartman's going to be looking to go to the draft this year. And kind of just like what I said about Caleb Williams
Well,
is
yeah, I mean he quite literally cannot stay in college anymore. So if it's not the NFL, then
he's
hopefully
done.
he's got a good job lined up.
Right, right. I mean, he's at Notre Dame. I'm sure his education is top notch to be at Notre Dame. Um,
Yeah.
but again, NFL scouts they watch these games. I'm sure they watched the Louisville game last week as well. Uh, is he a guy that really has the NFL talent? Is he somebody that can seriously make a living in the NFL, or is he going to be a practice squad player if he does decide to take the professional football route? Like I mean, he has so much potential and he has so much upside, and we've seen it before. we really have seen it before how good Hartman can be. And whether it is a just his receivers, his tight end isn't where it needs to be, that is what makes good quarterbacks great. Whenever you take, I guess, so-called average receivers and you make them elite receivers, right? Hartman doesn't have that. It kind of seems like he is kind of wanting his receivers to bail him out, where it should be the other way. The receiver should have the quarterback bail them out by just throwing beautiful passes where they can't drop it. It looks like Hartman is just throwing these balls up and hoping that his receivers can make a play. And obviously that's not happening.
Yeah. And as far as, the NFL potential behind him, uh, I don't know about you, but I find it so hard to predict how people are going to do in the league just because, so much can happen once they enter the league. We see so many players with no injury history just get riddled with injuries the moment they enter the league. And, on top of that, we're seeing kind of it's kind of always been there, but we're kind of seeing like a bigger shift in like the age of players going into the draft, especially with the last few years. We're seeing a lot of like 24-year-olds going into the draft, and teams are just not looking for a guy in their mid 20s to be a rookie on their team. Because I mean, that's an old rookie, Parker. 24 is an old rookie, and I think a lot of teams just aren't looking for that. And, it's hard to tell how he'll do in the league, but like you said, we've seen the potential. We've seen what he can do. If you look last year and you look at what he did for Wake Forest, I mean, that was a good Wake Forest team. He made that team good. They were top 10 in the country at one point. So, we like you said, we've seen the potential. We haven't seen too much this year, but still a solid quarterback nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, if you now in basketball, like NBA, it's so much different because your so-called prime is your late 20s, early 30s. That is when you're so-called in your prime. In football, that window is so much smaller. You only have like a really, I feel like for most players, you only have about a 4-year gap where you're so-called in your prime, and that is your late to or your mid to late 20s. And I guess Hartman is technically in his prime. He should be at the top of his game where he's at right now. And now I hope it doesn't turn out where he just is continuously on a down slope. But I mean, you see what he's done last year and the drop off he has gone to this year. It could be like you could be seeing almost the end of his so-called prime. And like you said, to your point, I mean, if I was an NFL scout, I probably would not be looking to add Hartman to my team.
Yeah, and that's a good point as well, by the way. The 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 peak of players and the way that teams are kind of letting guys go, like when they're still, young guys. I mean, it's just such a big shift in the NFL. I know this isn't an NFL episode, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but I mean, we're seeing a lot of guys hit 30 and then people are acting like they have the plague, and then, nobody wants to touch them the moment they hit 30. We're seeing that right now with Derrick Henry, who's 29, about to turn 30, and the Titans are looking to trade him away. So, it's a crazy thing to see happen in the NFL, especially with such good players. But it's definitely worrisome when you look at some of these college guys who are 24, 25, and just not even in the league yet. They're still seniors in college. So it's definitely an interesting thing to see. I know a lot of things happened in the past few years that, made it possible for these guys to still be in college, which I completely understand why they would want to stay in college. But I just find it so hard for guys like that to really find success at the next level.
Yeah, which I mean, if you're not ready for the league, I think the biggest jump in all of professional sports is going from college football to professional football. Like there's such a crazy talent difference and just like these athletes that are in the
The
NFL
rule
are insane.
changes.
Yeah, the rule changes, everything like that. And so if you're not ready, don't go to the draft. It's not like the NBA where if you go early, where people say you're not ready yet, you can develop and still have so much time left in your career. And NFL, you're basically drafted to be a so-called win now player. Like they are want you out there, they want you producing as soon as you get drafted. And I mean, you see players all the time that aren't ready to be drafted, and they just don't really turn out to be anything.
Yeah, and there is no G League in this sport, so I mean,
Correct.
it's definitely a hard transition when you know that you pretty much have to be ready the moment you step out there on that field. But
Yeah.
going from that game, Notre Dame USC, I think it's time, Parker. I think it's time we both have our individual rants and complain about our respective teams a little bit. That being Louisville and Kentucky, both coming off of losses this week. Parker, would you like to start first with Kentucky, or shall I start first with Louisville?
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Give us a moment here, everybody. Technical difficulties. He'll come back any moment, but because this is a podcast, and because it's late and I don't feel like cutting any of this out, you guys are going to get to hear my beautiful voice for, I don't know, maybe the next 30 seconds as I talk about myself. Yo,
Can you
Parker.
hear me?
Yeah, there you are.
Okay, I could hear you the entire time, but I don't think you could hear me.
Really? Yeah, I couldn't hear you. You cut
Yeah, I
out for
could
that
hear
whole
you.
time.
Yeah,
Anyways,
okay, so
would you like to start first, or shall I?
yeah, I can start first with Kentucky, and I really don't
Okay.
have too much to say here. I could
Okay.
there's like, and I can complain about every single play, right? But I'm not going to. This was a game that, if you guys know that I was at this game, I was extremely amped for this game. I was excited for this game. Uh, Obviously, coming off the Georgia loss, this is such a bounce back win. And I even said it last week. There's so much game. There's so many tough games for Kentucky still to be played. But this game against Missouri, who is a top 25 opponent. I know they technically weren't last week, but they're still a top 25 opponent. This is such a big win and a bounce back win that if we do somehow lose this game, people could say that this season's a failure. This is a failure season. And for just to let everybody know, Kentucky did lose. We lost 38-21. Um, Now that the score looks like it was a blowout, it was not necessarily a blowout. Um, so basically, breaking down this game, the scapegoat, which has been all year.
Real quick, I just want to say real quick to add to Parker's point about how it wasn't really a blowout. To add to that point for anybody that might not have actually watched the game, he is not lying. Kentucky kind of just let the game fall away from their fingertips in the fourth quarter. It was really unfortunate, but yeah, the score is very deceiving, for sure.
Yeah. So this Devin Leary is the scapegoat all the time, right? Kentucky struggles. They don't put up a gazillion points. They don't beat Georgia. They fall in the fourth quarter to Missouri, and everybody's like off with Leary's head. And if you have been watching these college football episodes, you know that I am a supporter of Devin Leary, and I still have faith in Devin Leary. Again, after losing to Missouri, that has not changed. The reasoning why, you look at his stats, he did not have a good game by any means. He had 14 completions off of 27 attempts, only 120 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, right? But if you watch that game, you would know, I bet you there was 5, at least 5 plays that hit receivers right in the hands. One of them hit a receiver right in the helmet, that Kentucky just didn't catch the ball. We literally we
Here we go again, everyone. Technical difficulties yet again. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. Hopefully, hopefully, man, Parker might have to get his Wi-Fi checked out. He might
Hello,
have to get that fixed. Hello,
hear me?
there you are. Yeah, there you are.
Okay, let me try and finish. Let me try and finish this before I get cut out real quick because I'm almost done. Uh,
You're
there were
good. You're
so
good.
many. What was the last thing that you heard?
Uh, that there were just the receivers were having trouble catching the ball.
Yeah. Okay. So that was a whole thing where Leary throws you the ball, and on a third down situation, and you aren't able to convert. Fairly easy catches. And it's not. It's the fact that you're not even giving it a chance. Now, if you catch the ball and you're short of the first down marker, that's one thing. But you're not even catching the ball. You don't even have a chance. If it hits you in the hands, you got to catch it, right? The second thing
Mm-hmm.
where there was some controversy, and me and Josh even talked about it a little bit. People were really upset with Stoops, and I can see your frustration with Stoops. That first quarter, we dominated. We absolutely dominated Missouri, offensively and defensively. And the big reasoning is
Oh yeah.
Ray Davis. Ray Davis, he is far and away, he has shown to be one of, if not the best, running backs in the SEC. The first quarter alone, Josh, he had almost 70 rushing yards in the first quarter and 2 touchdowns. Both of those touchdowns in the first quarter, both of them came from Ray Davis. All of a sudden, we completely stopped running the ball. He like I saw a stat, but I don't know where it is, and I don't remember what it was, but it was like out of the 20 rushing attempts that he had 12 rushing attempts in the first 3 drives of the game, and throughout the rest of the entire game, he only had 8 rushing attempts. You just completely changed the game plan. It's working. Why stop? I know. I mean, I'm guessing he was wanting a performance from Devin Leary to kind of get people off his back. I'm guessing that's what was happening. That's why we decided to run the ball or throw the ball so much. But you let the game get away from us because we go away from our game plan. That not only is it working today, but it has worked all season long. And so I'm just like, I see where people are frustrated with Stoops after that game. Um, but that's really all I have as far as breaking down that performance for that week.
Yeah. And real quick before I talk about my team, you listed off some interesting statistic comparisons to me the other night, on the phone. I believe. Do you remember what I'm? Do you know what I'm talking about here?
No.
About Jack Plummer and Devin Leary, and then
Oh, yes, yes,
Ray
yes,
Davis
yes,
and Jawar Jordan. If you want to
yes.
pull those up real quick, just to kind of give the listeners a interesting little fact while I start
Now
my rant, you can just
it might have,
interrupt me whenever you.
it changed a little bit from last week, obviously, to this week. But basically what it is, and the stats are still really, really close. Devin Leary on the year, he has thrown 1,377 passing yards. Jack Plummer has thrown 1,901 passing yards. Leary has 14 touchdowns. Plummer has 13 touchdowns. Leary has 7 interceptions. Plummer has 8 interceptions. Ray Davis has 781 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns on 111 attempts. Jawar Jordan has 661 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns on 89 attempts. So now this past week definitely changed stuff, but when I initially read it off to Josh, all 4 of the Leary and Plummer stats and Davis's and Jordan's stats, they were almost identical to a T. They I'm not
Practically
like
identical, yeah.
it was insane. I was astonished to see how close it was.
It was
It looks
really
like
weird.
it looks like Davis had a little bit better of a game than Jawar Jordan this past week, so his stats are a little bit more, I guess, buffed than Jawar Jordan, but it still doesn't take away. They basically are having the same exact season.
Yeah, so I guess off of that note, especially off that last thing you just said about Jawar, I guess I'll go ahead and get into my point. Louisville falls to Pitt, uh, funny enough, 38-21. Handing the
wow.
Louisville Cardinals their first, handing the Louisville Cardinals their first loss. There's a few things that I want to point out in this one. The first thing I want to talk about, again, very very interesting coincidence again. But
hang on. The first thing I want you to talk about, because I didn't watch this game. I'm literally just looking at the box score right now. This is the first thing you have to talk about, just because I want to know what happened. What the fuck happened with Jawar Jordan? 2 attempts, 8 yards.
Yeah. Okay. So essentially, in the first quarter, very early on, Jawar Jordan took a hit, went down, and then never came back in the game. Was seen on the sideline with his gear still on, but was never put back in the game. So was rolled out, I guess, quietly for that game, and just off the bat, you take our best player out of the game right off the bat in the first quarter, very early on. So definitely was not fun to see. But moving on from that, you'd expect us to still do fine, especially with all the other weapons we have on this team. But that leads me to the next point I have, which, funny enough, like I was saying, Parker, another coincidence here with the Louisville Cardinals this past week was the wide receivers. Seemingly could not catch a single pass. Many drops this past week. Just balls that fell into the hands of the receivers and just dropped them.
Palmer threw the ball.
Also, though, yeah, and then also on top of that, when you look at the game, I mean, listen, I'm not a coach, so, I don't know what these coaches are thinking. But when, Parker, I'd like to hear your answer on this, actually. When you go into a game and it is pouring down rain, like rain is covering the cameras, people are wearing ponchos in the stadium, like just, it is raining and it is not stopping. Is that a game that you go into saying, hey, let's pass the ball 52 times?
No, not at all. And what I am looking at, when Louisville did run the ball, even though it was their backup, both of their backups, it seemed like they had decent success, I mean, nothing that like, oh my gosh, this guy's next man up. But I mean, it doesn't look like they were getting shut down running the ball. It looked like they got what they wanted.
Yeah, and so that leads me to my next point, which is, again, a weird coincidence here, but Louisville seemingly went away from the run game as the game went on. Now, in the second half of the game, Louisville kind of gave Pitt the win, getting outscored 17-0 in the third quarter. So I can see why we started to pass more. But again, if the run game is working the way it was, which it was, it wasn't working perfectly. Like there definitely weren't many break-off big runs like we would see from Jawar Jordan. But Maurice Turner and Isaac Garendo are like very capable backups. I mean, there's a reason why we saw a running back by committee for the first couple weeks, is because our running back room is they're all just so good. And Maurice Turner, I just want to point out, had 12 carries for 81 yards, and he averaged 6.8 yards a carry. You're going to tell me that we're just going to stop handing the ball off to him at some point when he's averaging 7 yards a carry? Like, and on top of that, it's pouring down rain, and you're going to have Jack go out there and pass the ball over and over and over and over again. And then on top of that, after you see him kind of make some lackluster decisions and kind of throw it into double coverage, which, by the way, this might make me blow my fuse here, Parker, but as I was watching the game, and this was not when we were down, by the way, so if you're a Louisville fan and you're getting mad at me for like what I'm saying so far, suck my dick, fuck you. Jack Plummer, I don't know why, but he decided to throw the ball deep every single pass play for maybe 3 possessions in a row. I mean, just every single pass play, he looked like he was just looking for that deep bomb to Jamari Thrash, Jimmy Callaway, whoever it may have been. And that just made me so mad to no end. Because why are you throwing it deep every single play when you can see 2 Pitt defenders on the receiver? And I don't know if he was trying to bait a defensive pass interference call on every pass, but you're not going to get a flag on every play. I mean, Pitt was already out penaltying us by like 7 or 8 flags. So they're not going to start calling more flags on them every single play. You know what I mean? And it made me really mad seeing him throwing it deep because he had already thrown 2 picks by the point he started doing this super consistently. And those 2 picks, I would probably say one of them was his fault. The other one was kind of a weird wide receiver drop, and it kind of bounced up into the air and was caught by the defender. So that one I can give him some leeway on. But that first interception he threw was just god awful. And I just, I just don't see how we can go into that game, see the weather conditions, and decide to pass 52 times in the game, especially when the run game was so successful. I mean, Isaac Garendo, 13 carries for 38 yards, only 2.9 yards per carry, but he did have 2 touchdowns, both at the goal line. So, I mean, if we got to the goal line, we had a very capable back that was able to get us in there. But, I mean, Maurice Turner, like I mentioned already, was having a very good game, and then we just kind of shied away from him, and it just didn't make any sense at all. And, I mean, the defense was okay. What definitely did not compare to the defense we saw against Notre Dame, I'll tell you that. But, I mean, they performed as best as they could, especially in the rain in an away game. But just honestly, a super embarrassing performance by us. An embarrassing loss, especially coming after such a big win. And to be honest with you, Parker, I think we might have just held on to that win for a little too long. And I think we overlooked Pitt. We were looking forward to the bye week, and I don't think we came into that game prepared. And the weather conditions, especially, did not help at all either. But I'm not going to sit here and blame the weather because you got to be ready for everything, especially in football. So, a tough loss for us for sure, and knocked us back. Excuse me. And knocked us back down the rankings to where we're at now at 21.
Which, I mean, to your point, where the little thing you said about we held on to that this win too long, the Notre Dame win too long. I mean, I don't want to say I disagree, but I mean, I'm sitting here looking at all these stats of this game. Louisville pretty much dominated Pitt in every single statistical category. Every one of them, it was pretty much night and day. Besides overall rushing yard, Pitt had 8 more rushing yards than you all. But I mean, other than that, man, I mean, the only thing that really kind of shows a kind of just like a win for Pitt is the turnovers, and then also the
Yeah, I
fumbles.
mean,
I see you guys
one
had
of those
5
pick.
fumbles in the game.
Yeah, yeah. We had problems holding on to the ball.
That's unacceptable.
But I mean, yeah, it is. But one of those picks was returned for a pick 6, which definitely didn't help at all either. But the turnovers are definitely what lost us that game. And having that many turnovers in a game is it's unacceptable, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing I feel about Kentucky and Louisville, which I've been talking to you about this since week 1. And most of our friends in our friend groups are Louisville fans. There's not many of us Kentucky fans in the friend group, so we got to keep our ground whenever we're talking Kentucky versus Louisville and anything. And I've said it to you, Josh. I'm so looking forward to this Kentucky versus Louisville game because, in a way, they are the exact same team. You know what I mean? And I see that so clearly in like a week like where Kentucky loses to Missouri and Louisville loses to Pitt. Obviously, both of our main focal points is running the ball. We have both of us have best running backs in our conferences, our respected conferences. Um, Whenever that doesn't work, or a player gets hurt, or we go away from the game plan, we look like a totally different team. And you see that we saw it both games. All right, Louisville went away from running the ball, even though Jawar Jordan was hurt. You like you said, they you have a very capable backup running back, and it looked like he did do his job whenever he did get the ball. And then for Kentucky, Ray Davis ran all over Missouri in the first quarter, and then they stopped. And both teams completely just shut down. They don't. I don't know. I don't know how to describe why they shut down and how they shut down, but it looks like, I guess, in practice maybe they're just continuously running the ball, and they're working on running the ball, and perfecting this run game. That whenever they don't have that run game, that they lose. They forget everything. And so when Kentucky does go play Louisville, it is seriously gonna be, if you were to get on Madden and play the Chiefs versus the Chiefs, right? It's the same team practically. I'm looking forward to it. I really am. And as a Kentucky fan, I know it's still a ways away, and we got big games coming up before we even get to Louisville. We got to figure it out. We really do. We got to figure out, because, and like I said, I'm still got faith in Devin Leary. Um, I'm I'm pretty sure I'm the only Kentucky fan, especially at this point coming after the second loss, that will say that, and proudly say that I have faith in Devin Leary. But I do. I really do. I think that he hasn't had that game yet. That really shows people that he is that same quarterback from NC State, and he still can be that quarterback in NC State. Um, the run game isn't gonna be there. We got two tough opponents coming up in Alabama and Tennessee, both of them with pretty decent run defense. So Stoops, you're gonna have to figure it out, man. Wide receivers, you guys got to figure it out. The ball is gonna come your way. You got to make a play when you get that ball. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Um, and just because the wide receivers aren't doing bad, are doing bad, you can't put that on Devin Leary. You can't sit there and say, "Oh, Devin Leary's inaccurate. Devin Leary's not putting the ball where he's supposed to." I understand that to an extent, but these are still college wide receivers. These are still Division 1 wide receivers. If they have a ball that is thrown anywhere directly towards them, especially if it hits them in the hands, they need to bring those balls in. Pause. And so, I mean, we got to figure it out, because Ray Davis isn't going to be able to run all over these teams, regardless of how good he is and how much I love Ray Davis. I wish he would, but it's not going to be that way. We saw it against Missouri. Even if we just went away, Ray Davis wasn't as a part of the offense like he should have been, and we just couldn't figure it out. And it seemed like Louisville did the exact same thing.
Yeah, for sure. And listen, I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna speak for both teams here. Even though I'm not a Kentucky fan, I'm gonna go ahead and speak for me and Parker, because I'm sure Parker feels the same way. Listen, guys, if you're a Kentucky fan, if you're a Louisville fan, it does not matter. Don't get discouraged from these two games. One thing a thing that bothered me, and I'm not a Kentucky fan, so I'm not going to speak too much about this, Parker, but I know it kind of bothered you too personally, especially after talking to you personally. But in that fourth quarter, Kroger Field looked like a dead man's land. It looked like a ghost town there. And I know you stayed until the end of the game, but about 95% of that stadium did not. And again, I can kind of see why, I wanted to beat the traffic. But, listen, it was still a somewhat, winnable game in that fourth quarter. Was it not? Am I wrong when I say that?
No, it was.
Yeah.
And so so like the Louisville game, the weather was horrendous. It was freezing cold. It was pouring down rain. I know I personally I personally was completely soaked, but I really didn't care. I was already there. I knew I was gonna get wet regardless. I was gonna get the same amount of wet if I sat here watching this game or if I was walking to my car. So I was gonna stay regardless. And so like I know the weather wasn't very good, but it was a ghost town, and the thing that really stands out, it wasn't like there was 4 minutes left in the game. It was the start of the 4th quarter. Like, the Kentucky hype video was playing, saying, "Hey, Kentucky, let's go out and win this game," while people are just piling out. And then every single time that Kentucky had the ball and we had to punt it or we turned the ball over or something like that, more and more fans got up and walked out. And there was some Missouri fans behind us. And I mean, I'm pretty sure they were poking fun at Kentucky, but they were like just sitting there kind of laughing. They're like, "What are you guys doing? There's so much time left in this ball game." And I was like, I didn't turn around and like talk to them or anything like that, but like I did. I was like, I was agreeing with them. I was like, I mean, I don't know. We've seen this so many times. Fourth quarter comebacks are nothing new in football. It's not like it's impossible, especially two scores
Mhm.
against a team like Missouri that we saw versus LSU. They can give up points so easily. They are known for giving up a boatload of points in a short amount of time, right? And so like this game is a
Mhm.
very winnable game, and it just seemed like Kentucky lost faith. And I think it was just a mixture of they are so tired of Devin Leary, and now you add in the fact that people are pissed off at Mark Stoops for the coaching, the so-called coaching job that he did. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. I think that I think that we just as a crowd, as a fan base as a whole, we gotta learn to have faith and not be so short fused because we're the same way with basketball. It's the same exact way with basketball. It's actually it's probably worse in basketball. That I mean, dude, we're not we are you don't understand how hard it is to go undefeated, especially in the SEC, right? It's so hard to win every single game in the SEC, regardless if you're supposed to win or not. I tell you this right now, and this you could take this as a hot take. Teams like Oregon, teams like Washington, USC, they are fighting to stay above 500 in the SEC. I will say that. How tough the SEC is every single game, regardless of who you're playing. The SEC is so incredibly difficult, especially on the road.
Yeah, it is definitely a very hard conference, and it's not easy by any means. But off of your points and going back to what I was saying a couple minutes ago, listen, everyone, just don't give up hope so easily. I can't speak the same for Louisville fans, obviously, Parker, because it was at Pitt, so there weren't really that many Louisville fans to begin with. But we have a huge and based off the rankings, it might not seem that huge to too many people, but listen to me when I say this. A huge conference game this week against Duke. Or sorry, next week against Duke.
Yeah.
And listen, we need to pack that stadium out. I'm not expecting a Notre Dame packed house again, but pretty damn close, because I mean, that is a very important game for us, and we need to win that game. And I mean, if fans of Louisville saw that Pittsburgh loss and are just mad and upset on the season and they think all is lost and they don't want to go to the games anymore, then you're probably delusional and you should probably, like, I don't know, go to the doctor or something. But listen, Kentucky fans, Louisville fans, just keep going to the games, keep showing support. I mean, it means a lot to those kids. It means a lot to the players. It means a lot to the coaching staff. And they feel your energy when you're there. And I'll tell you this, they feel the energy too when you leave the game early. When those stadiums become empty with a whole fourth quarter left to play, those players notice it. I'll tell you that. And it makes them feel terrible.
Yeah, I mean, there was a part in the Kentucky game, really quick. Sorry to cut you off. There was a part in the Kentucky game where we scored and we actually took a 1-point lead. This was in the third quarter. That place was absolutely jumping. That place was so like that place was just absolutely popping. The whole Kentucky sideline was jumping up. Um, Grove Street Party was on, and like during the kickoff, everybody was jumping. We were up by 1 point, and then like within a matter of 5-minute game time and game time, the place cleared out.
Yeah, you know, I'll say it one last time. Don't give up hope. Keep going to the games. Louisville fans, go to the Louisville Duke game if you can. Pack it out. It's going to be a very good game. It's going to be a very important game. Kentucky fans, pack out that stadium for Tennessee. You got to do it. Show the team support still. Both teams, you just have to. Don't give up hope on your teams just because they have 1 loss, 2 losses. The season's not over. Both teams can still finish the season strong. And, for the sake of the rivalry as well, if both teams are doing great going into that game, I mean, like Parker said, I'm super excited for it. It's going to be a great one. But just keep showing support and, don't give up because there's still a lot of ball left to be played.
Which I know we'll dive into it more next week whenever like we're talking about the Louisville Duke Kentucky Tennessee game, actually like the preview of it. But Josh, are you going to that Louisville Duke game? Like, are you going to go actually?
I have to figure out what time it's at, but unfortunately, it's looking like it is a fat no, because unfortunately, I have a family wedding to go to on that day.
Man.
So I personally will not even be there, but that is why I'm preaching to the Louisville fans to just show up, because, if I can't go, I got to live through you all. So, just pack it out for your boy.
I think I'm going to ride down to Kroger Field again to try and catch that Tennessee game.
It's going to be a good game. Both games are going to be really good. So I don't see why anybody would not want to go to the game, especially if you can. You know what I mean?
Right,
like those games are going to be good games.
Yeah, right.
But moving on, Parker, to kind of finish us up here, we got a couple more topics to go on to. We're going to jump to Week 8 real quick and just go over Week 8 really quickly. There's a couple games that I want to point out specifically, and then after that, we'll go ahead and do our predictions. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
All right. The first one, I think it's the most notable game of the day by far. It's a huge Big Ten matchup, and it is going to say a lot, I think, for these national rankings even. And that is Penn State at Ohio State. What do you see happening in that game? And do you see anything that you're specifically going to be looking out for?
Yeah, the rushing game for Penn State. If they can get a rushing offense and they can get, or if their running backs is on, I should say, Ohio State has a pretty average run defense. It's not bad, but it's also not something where you're like, wow, they have the best run defense in football. Right. They have seen it in the past, especially against Notre Dame. If they let their opponent, they are going to run all over Ohio State. And I could easily see Penn State having that type of day where they get whatever they want on the ground. And even if their aerial attack isn't working at all, it's just going to be a straight, we're going to get whatever we want, and we're just going to run it down your throat. Pause again.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be a good game. In my opinion, I think if they can get Nick Singleton going, it's definitely going to be good for them. But also, if Drew Aller can get going in that game, I mean, they haven't really played too much so far this season. They've only played one ranked opponent against Iowa, and I mean, I've stated this publicly on the podcast before. Just such a boring ass team to watch, and on top of that, they lost 31-0 to Penn State. So, it's not even really a game worth mentioning because other non-ranked teams scored more than 0. I mean, even Delaware put up 7 against Penn State. So, but Penn State, I'm very interested in seeing Drew Aller and how he performs because I think he can put his name kind of on the Heisman Watch map. A lot of people were kind of looking at him this season and saying, hey, he could make Penn State really good because I know Sean Clifford in the past couple years wasn't able to get Penn State over that hump. But a lot of people think Drew Aller can, and so far he looks like he can. And if they could beat Ohio State, who's currently ranked number 3, I mean that's good signs for them. But I mean, going over to the Ohio State side of the ball, I mean, I'm blanking on his name. 1 second, sorry. I apologize. Kyle McCord. If Kyle McCord can perform good again like he did against Notre Dame, I mean, that will surely put his name on the map, or keep his name on the map, because ever since that Notre Dame game, people have kind of been putting their eyeballs on him a little bit. And then obviously the obvious one is seeing how the receivers for Ohio State do, that being Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, because they're both just extremely good and probably the most ideal targets that you can have in college football right now. And if those 3 can get going, then I think that Penn State defense is going to struggle a little bit. But real quick again, to another point, Penn State and Ohio State have, pretty damn good defenses respectively. So it could also be a game where we see, which defense is the better defense, and whichever team has the better defense that day could be the winner. So I think just overall it's going to be a very good game, and a game that I'm definitely going to have my eye on, and that I think other people should have their eye on as well.
Yeah, I think this is a big put you on the map game for Penn State, because I know they beat Iowa, who was technically ranked 24th. They haven't really lived up to expectations this year, but other than that, this is really the first game for Penn State that they've been climbing up these rankings so high, and they continue up to, what are they, 7 now? I believe, are they 7?
Penn State?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're 7.
Yeah, they're 7. So they keep climbing up these rankings. They're up to 7. I think last week they were 6, and they haven't necessarily played anybody too crazy. Um, Besides that Iowa game where they did dominate Iowa, I will give them that. This is the first game. This is the first real contest for Penn State to, again, which I'm all locked into right now, is the playoff picture. Who is gonna make that playoff? Who's gonna make in the playoffs? And I mean, this is a do or die situation for the most part for Penn State.
Yeah, and if you recall last week, Parker, I actually said Penn State was my dark horse for the playoffs. So if they win, I mean that only helps me.
Right? Yeah,
But
exactly.
but it's also just a big game for Ohio State as well, because if they can win this game and just assert their dominance in the Big Ten, then that's going to mean a lot for them as a program, obviously. But again, Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan, all 3 of those schools play each other. So the Big Ten race is definitely an interesting one, and one that I'm going to keep up with for the rest of the season. Moving
Yes,
on
me
from
too.
that game, though, moving on from the Big Ten, we got a SEC matchup here. It's definitely an interesting one that I personally, just my own personal opinion, I don't actually seeing it be. I don't see it being that close. But the game I'm referring to is Tennessee at Alabama. Parker, how do you see that game going, and what are you looking out for in that game?
I am looking forward to another game where I'm looking forward to the rushing attack. Tennessee has such a good running offense, and Alabama has a fairly really good running defense. And it's kind of like especially in the SEC world, where if you're just looking at SEC teams, Tennessee, I would say, probably has the best running offense in the SEC. Alabama definitely is top 3 as far as defense goes. It's more or less, it's basically a immovable object meets a what's the word? Immovable object meets a, you need to finish it for me.
Immovable object.
What's that saying? How's that saying go?
What what was the
Never
what was
mind.
the start of
Regardless. Okay.
it?
Anyways, uh, but yeah, I think it's going to be a show of can Tennessee continue to run the ball very well, and then all for Alabama on the other side, figuring out offense. Their offense is going to have to show up. Tennessee has a pretty good defense, nothing crazy, but they have a pretty good defense. Um, they're definitely a defense that is good enough that if Alabama lets them, they're going to eat them up. And it's still to this point, we have not seen a dominating performance offensively from Alabama, and it could be a long day for the Roll Tide.
Yeah, I will say though, however, in the past few weeks, Milroe has looked far more impressive than Milton. Milroe seems to be slowly coming into his role over at Alabama, and Milton just as the weeks go by, at least in my opinion, I go further and further away from the opinion that he is that Hooker replacement. And I mean, at this point in the season, he definitely isn't because he has done nowhere close to what Hooker was able to do last year. But still has a great arm. I mean, one of the best arms I've seen in college, and same with Milroe. They both have an arm on them. But yeah, I'm fairly excited for that game. I'm not gonna say my prediction right now, obviously, but I don't. I also don't see it being that close, though, as I stated. I think there's, at least in my opinion, a clear winner. But I mean, I've said that before and been very wrong. So, I wouldn't listen to my opinion, to be honest, after hearing me say that the past couple of weeks. But off of that note, I guess, Parker, would you like to go into our predictions?
Yeah, really quick before we go on, I do have one more game. I kind of want to hear what you have to say about it, just because you are a Louisville
Okay.
fan, you are an ACC fan. Florida State
Okay.
Duke, a huge game. It's at Florida State now, but and obviously, like you said, we're about to get into the predictions, and we'll kind of go more into depth on who you think is going to win. But what do you see coming out of that game?
I think it depends on if Riley Leonard plays for Duke. I think Riley Leonard, I said this last week, but Riley Leonard means so much to that team. Obviously, they were able to pull out the win against NC State last week with the backup in, which I don't even know what his name is, which is kind of disrespectful to me, to be honest, or to him, I mean. But, I mean, they were able to pull off the win still, which is very good for them.
Henry Bellin.
Henry Bellin. So, with Bellin in, they were still able to get the win, which is a good sign for them for sure. But I still think it depends on if Riley Leonard plays, because I mean that Duke defense is good enough to probably hold the Seminoles every now and then, but they're not going to be able to hold them forever. And if Duke can't do anything on their offensive drives, then I mean we could be seeing a rough game by the Duke Blue Devils. And I mean, and then to that point, Florida State, their offense is just, I mean, they look unbeatable. Jordan Travis and Keon Coleman look like an unstoppable duo, and I think Johnny Wilson, which, by the way, if you don't know this, is a 6'7" fucking receiver. He's 6'7", and he's a receiver, which is mind-blowing to me. But regardless, he's dealing with an injury right now, so he might be out, which is a big bonus for Duke. I'll say. I mean, it's definitely a massive target taken out of the game. But I mean, when you look at Florida State and you look at their games so far this season, he's not even the one that you've had to worry about. It's the guy that's 3 inches shorter than him in Keon Coleman, which he's still 6'4", so I mean it doesn't matter. Their receiving core is just inhuman. Yeah. But I'm definitely, as an ACC fan, I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye out on that game. If Duke can pull it out, that would be incredible. It would definitely boost ticket sales for that Louisville game. But I mean, yeah, it's going to be a good game, I hope. But like I said, it depends on if Riley Leonard plays, because he plays a huge part in that Duke team.
Right. I agree.
Alrighty. So, the time has come, Parker, to end us off. We're going to jump into our Week 8 predictions. Are you ready?
I sure am.
Alrighty. The first game of our fine Saturday morning tomorrow is Penn State at Ohio State. Who you got?
You know what? I am actually going to start this thing off with a controversial pick. I'm actually going to go ahead and take Penn State here.
You know what? I like it that you said that because I'm actually taking Penn State too. Maybe not for
Oh,
the same
man.
reasons. I'm kind of taking them because they're my dark horse, and if I don't pick them, it kind of like contradicts my whole, they could be the dark horse for the playoffs argument. But I also think they have a very, very good chance at beating Ohio State. I mean, the Penn State defense is very elite. So they could definitely stop Ohio State. But, like I said earlier, it all depends on how Drew Aller performs and how that offense can get going. So, but yeah, I'm taking Penn State as well.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you look at the last time Ohio State played a legitimate tough opponent was Notre Dame, and they barely escaped with a win. And from what I have honestly seen, for both Penn State and Notre Dame, Penn State looks like a much better. Now, granted, Penn State necessarily hasn't really played anybody, but I mean, Penn State looks like a better all around team than Notre Dame has so far, in my opinion. And so, I mean, I don't know. I could see an upset brewing for sure.
Yeah, the one thing that worries me though is James Franklin, who is the Penn State head coach. He's 1-8 against Ohio State in his time at Penn State. His one win being when Saquon was on that team in 2016. So, has me worried a little bit. But that team looks like a brand new Penn State from the years past. So, very exciting. But moving on, Parker. The next game we've got is UCF at Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, easily.
I'm taking Oklahoma. Next one. We've got the battle of the military, my friend. Air Force at Navy.
I am quite excited for this. Air Force is undefeated still. Somehow they're undefeated. I don't know anything about either of these two teams, and I don't know if you do either. I'm just gonna go ahead and take the undefeated team because I love the story. If somehow Air Force could go undefeated on the season, I'm taking Air Force here.
Yeah, so far this kind of seems like one of those NCAA 14 uh franchise modes that you play. You just pick a random team. I have actually I remember when I was a kid picking Navy and just turning them into an undefeated team every season, but regardless, I'm gonna, as much as it hurts me to say this, Parker, I'm gonna actually avoid my family history as far as the Navy goes, and I think I'm gonna go ahead and I think I just have to go Air Force here. It hurts me to say that. I deep down I really want to pick Navy, but I mean the skill gap in these military games like this is usually pretty blatant, and so I don't think I can pick Navy, especially if I want to have a better week than the other 2 weeks. So I'm going Air
Now,
Force.
I don't know who Air Force has played, and again, I just haven't watched Air Force at all this year. But I am looking at through these stats, and I don't know if you knew this. Air Force currently is ranked number 1 in rushing offense out of all of football right now. Did you know that?
I did not know that, but it's not hard for me to believe because they run a run option offense.
On the other side, Navy, again, another team I've not watched at all, they are currently ranked 5th in rushing defense in all of football. So you want to talk about just two powerhouses going at it. That's gonna be a fun time.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting stat for sure. Uh, to keep my eye. I'm definitely gonna. I mean, I'm definitely gonna watch that game just because of the family history, and I kind of always find myself watching that game every year. So I'm definitely gonna
Oh yeah.
peep it every now and then. But support the troops in that. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
moving on to the next game, we got Tennessee at Alabama.
As much as I would love to see Tennessee pull out this win, um, just because, like I said last week, I want Tennessee to be at the best they can going into play Kentucky. I am actually going to go ahead and take Alabama. I think Alabama just edges them out, being at Alabama as well.
Yeah, I'm taking Alabama as well. Mainly just because ever since that Florida game, I haven't really been able to trust Tennessee. Um, but also because Alabama in the past few weeks has actually looked like Alabama. So yeah, I'm gonna go Alabama, and I'm gonna go Alabama comfortably here. The next game here, we got Washington State at Oregon.
Um, Again, I would love to see Washington State win this game, but dude, they're in shambles right now. I don't see this game being competitive at all. I think this is just another just kicking a man while he's down. I think Oregon wins comfortably.
I also think Oregon wins comfortably. The next game here, Parker, we got Minnesota at Iowa.
I briefly talked about Iowa, saying that they haven't necessarily lived up to the hype that they thought they were going to be at the beginning of the season. They do look like they are starting to get back on track ever since they did lose to Penn State. I don't see that changing this week either. I'm picking Iowa.
I'm also picking Iowa in what I think might be one of the lowest scoring games of the week. I think they'll probably win 14-0. The next game we've got North Texas at Tulane.
Wow. Tulane. Sure. Don't know a single thing about either team.
Me neither. I'm gonna go Tulane because they're ranked. The next game we got South Carolina at Missouri.
An interesting game. South Carolina has proven not to be very good, but like I said earlier, any team can win in the SEC on any given Saturday. Um, but I am taking Missouri here.
I'm also gonna take Missouri mainly because of the way that they were able to, mainly because of the way that they were able to play against Kentucky and the way that they were able to stay in that game and then eventually win. I think it showed a lot of heart in that team, and also just
But
because I haven't been too impressed with South Carolina this year either. So I'm gonna go Missouri.
at the same time, though, I'm still picking Missouri. But like I said earlier, Missouri is known for giving up a lot of points in a short amount of time. Don't be surprised if we come back next Thursday talking about the upset that South Carolina put up.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Next game here we got Texas at Houston.
Texas.
I'm also taking Texas. Next game we got Virginia at UNC.
North Carolina.
I'm also going UNC. They've looked unstoppable so far this season, and Drake May looks
Yes, they have.
incredible. What?
I said, yes, they have.
Oh, next game we got Ole Miss at Auburn.
A sneaky game, sneaky game, and I am gonna take the upset here. I'm gonna take Auburn here. I think they pull the game out, being at home.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky. Um, this is where I've fucked up in the past. I haven't taken the underdog, and then the underdog wins. Um, this is tricky. This is very tricky. But I think I have to go with my gut. I'm going Ole Miss.
I think that's the first. Is that the first difference we've had?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so we're gonna live or die this week. It looks like.
Yeah. The next one we've got Michigan at Michigan State.
Another great rivalry as far as football goes. Just all sports goes. Another great rivalry. But this year, Michigan is even being at Michigan State. Michigan looks so much better. Um, Michigan all the way.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen the reports recently, but with Michigan signal stealing,
Yeah,
also
yeah, I
gonna go
forgot about that.
Michigan, and it's gonna be Michigan by probably something that's unworldly. Which, by the way, I've seen reports of Michigan State trying to like pull out of this game for that reason.
Well, I saw something briefly about that. I didn't read too much into it. But I mean, if something were to happen and Michigan State pulls out of this game, nobody's gonna let Michigan State live that down, regardless of what has happening with Michigan. Everybody's just gonna say they were too scared to play Michigan this year, being a rivalry.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that happening, but also, I mean, if Michigan is stealing your plays from your signals, I mean, would you want to play them either if they just know what you're
No,
going to do every time?
no, they won it, but I mean, this is very similar to the COVID year in basketball. Kentucky and Louisville were supposed to play in basketball. There was someone on either Kentucky or Louisville ended up getting COVID right before the game. They had to cancel the game. They had a rescheduled date, and then Louisville pulled out for whatever reason. Me being a Kentucky fan, being with all these Kentucky fans, all the Kentucky fans said that Louisville was just too scared to play Kentucky this year. So, I mean, coming from a big rivalry like Michigan and Michigan State, if a team were to pull out, everybody would just say that, regardless of what actually is the truth.
That game would have been such a good game, too.
The Louisville Kentucky game.
Yeah, that game would have been such a good game.
Yeah, that was right before Louisville really went into like a full rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, I think Louisville was ranked as high as number 2 in the nation that year.
Something like that, yeah.
But, anyways, next game we got Army at LSU.
Another upset I would love to see happen. I would love to see Army pull this out. But I'm taking LSU. And then before you pick here, did you see well actually I'll let you take your pick here real quick.
I'm going LSU.
LSU, yeah. Did you see their end zone? How the way they did their end zone for this game?
I did, yeah.
The camo. I think it looks pretty cool. I'm excited to watch that game in person. Or not in person, but on TV.
Yeah, it's a pretty sick decoration they had going there. Pretty nice. Next game we got Duke at Florida State.
I'm gonna let you being the or ACC guy you are. I want to see what you say first before I take my pool.
Um, if Riley Leonard plays, I want to be clear. I'm going Florida State regardless. But I think if Riley Leonard plays, it'll be Florida State by a very much closer score than if he does not play.
I am actually going to. I'm gonna take the opposite. I am taking Duke. I am taking the Blue Devils, and that's coming from a Kentucky fan. I'm supposed to hate Duke, but I'm picking Duke here. And my reasoning behind this is because Florida State, the games that have been against better opponents, regardless besides LSU, where they dominated LSU, um, the games against better opponents like Clemson, they have seemed to struggle terribly at times. We have seen the cracks in Florida State against solid teams. Duke is up there with the most solid out of any teams all the way around. I just see that a upset could happen, and I'm taking Duke.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean, but at least in my opinion, if they don't have their starting quarterback to be able to take advantage of those possessions that they might get for free from Florida State, then I don't think it'll matter too much. But one thing that I'm actually excited to see is that trench battle that they're gonna have in that game because Duke actually has one of the highest rated offensive lines in the country. I think they're number 5. I think in the country as far as offensive line goes. And then Florida State's defensive line is ranked in the top 5 as well. So that's going to be one hell of a trench battle.
Right, right.
The next game, we got the good old Pac-12 championship, Utah versus USC.
I'm gonna take USC, and I actually think this is gonna be a dominating bounce back performance from USC. I said this last week. I put money on USC They failed me, but I don't think they will do it twice. I more or less I hope they don't do it to me twice. But yeah, USC here.
Yeah, I'm gonna take USC as well. I just I don't. Yeah, I'm gonna take USC mainly because I don't think Utah's offense is that great. Their defense is good, but their offense isn't that great, and they haven't had Cam Rising all season, who I don't know what year he's in, but I mean, I'm kind of looking for him to play at some point this season because, I mean, he's a very good QB. He was one of those QBs that people were saying to look out for coming into this season, and he hasn't touched the field. So it's very unfortunate, but I think if they had Cam Rising, I would almost be inclined to take Utah. But I'm going USC.
Right.
The next game, we've got UCLA at Stanford.
I'm taking UCLA. The Cinderella story for Stanford is gonna come up way short. They would love imagine this. Me and you talk so much trash about Stanford, saying how bad they are, and then they go back-to-back games and pull off huge wins. That would just be insane. But I think UCLA is much better, and they're gonna win this game.
Yeah, I'm taking UCLA as well. The last game of the day that we've got here, and I don't think we're going to disagree on this one either. We've got Arizona State at Washington.
And I'm going to take the good old Huskies here.
I'm also going to take Washington. I think we only disagreed on 2 games this week.
I know, what was it? I know obviously Duke and Florida State, and then Mississippi or Ole Miss and Auburn. Are those the only two?
Auburn? Yeah, I think so.
So I mean,
All
like I
right.
said, we're
Yeah,
either
so
gonna,
it seems like
we're gonna live together or we're gonna die together.
yeah, unless those 2 games are the only games that like either you lose or I lose, which
Imagine we
would be
split it.
unfortunate. Or yeah, I think I would probably I gotta win one week. I gotta get my one at the very least.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well,
But
I mean, I think that's really kind of do it for this week, don't you think?
yeah, I think that's going to do it from us. That is going to be another episode of the Take His Whistle podcast in the books. Parker, I ask this every week, but for the last couple episodes, you haven't had much to say. Has that changed? Do you have any words or thoughts for the people before we let them go?
No.
All right. No words for you guys from Parker. And, as always, we thank you guys for listening if you made it this far. We will see you guys on Tuesday for the next NFL episode. We've got a good weekend coming this weekend for the NFL, so hopefully we've got a lot to talk about in that Tuesday episode. But thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you guys on Tuesday.
Peace.